we go.
Good morning. I'm Holly Betts. I'm the program manager here at the Westport Center for Senior Activities. We have Christine Hauck here, my longtime friend and expert on art and design. So I don't know, maybe 2 years ago, I talked to Chris about, we have an art lecturer who kind of lectures on the masters, but I thought it would be nice to lecture on, and they get lots of time and coverage. So I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice to pick out designers, these people who are incredibly talented. Beatrix Potter is really known for her illustrations. And I don't think people give lectures on her, and yet she was an incredible talent and also a naturalist, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
oh my gosh, talented naturalist.
Yes.
And you'll find out lots of other things about Beatrix Potter today. I hope.
Yes.
I hope I open the world of Beatrix Potter to you, because there's so much I learned by researching her.
You're up.
So, okay, welcome all of you. It's so nice to see you in person. I have to say that. So today our topic is Beatrix Potter. Her full name was actually Helen Beatrix Potter, but she went by Beatrix Potter, or affectionately Beatrice. We're focusing on the art and life of a beloved illustrator and magical, I call magical storyteller. So the photograph you're seeing on the left here, oh wait, let me just jump forward. So I'm going to give you, in the lecture, there was a book by Emily Zaks that's called The Art and Life of Beatrix Potter. And it's a really comprehensive look at Beatrix. And we have a lot of guest writers, and so I'm going to be quoting from them about her life and work. So the photo on the left here is, this is Beatrix at the age of 25. And she has on a lead there, she has her Benjamin Bunny. And it's from September 1891. She was born in 1866, and it's likely it was photographed in Hertfordshire. And I saw this one quote. So it says, Potter secretly purchased Benjamin Bunny from a bird shop in London and carried him home in a paper bag. Beatrix said his existence was not observed for a week. The art and design of Beatrix Potter, beloved illustrator and magical storyteller. That's going to be our heading for each of our slides, pretty much. You'll see on the left here, this is the cover of the book that we're focusing on today by Emily Zaks, The Art of Beatrix Potter. And just so it's a little sampling, just a very, very small sampling of her amazing artwork. So The Art of Beatrix Potter celebrates the work of beloved illustrator and magical storyteller Beatrix Potter, 1866 to 1943, internationally renowned. The seeds of her future fame as an exceptional artist were sown at an early age. So the photograph you're looking at below here is Beatrix Potter at age 9. She was photographed at Dalgise in 1875. Beatrix Potter loved the countryside, and she spent much of her otherwise conventional Victoria childhood drawing and studying animals. Her passion for the natural world was behind her creation of her famous series of little books. I have samples here I'm going to pass around at the end. This is the size of her little books, okay? She had like 20, it starts with The Tale of Peter Rabbit, which is what we're focusing on primarily today because we have no time to cover everything. But it sort of unlocks the key to her beginning, okay? So you'll notice when I pass this around, The Tale of Peter Rabbit, that it says, below her name, it says, the original and authorized edition. And we'll get into this because The Tale of Peter Rabbit she self-published it. Okay, she self-published it in 1902 before it was ever picked up by a publisher. So that's why they have to put original and authorized edition. Anyway, her passion for the natural world was behind her creation of her famous series of little books, which I said. The English Lake District was a main source of inspiration for her, where she lived for the last 30 years of her life as a farmer, meaning a sheep farmer, and a land conservationist working with the National Trust. We're going to watch a video because I want to introduce you to Beatrix Potter and her working method. So I'm just going to, since James is not here, I'm just going to stop share for just a second. It's in person. It's a combo. The world of Peter Rabbit. Okay. Okay. So, whoops. Now I have to go. What? I'm doing Jason's job. I'm doing Jason's job. So let's see how this works.
Wait, change the view.
There's someone I'm not getting it.
What do you have?
Oh, okay, right, yep.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm sorry. Touch that.
Yes, you're quite right. Shouldn't we get along with all those letters to mature? Yes, Mel is on one again. Poor child. Let's see if we can cheer him up. My dear Nell, I don't know what to write you, so I shall tell you a story about 4 little birds, whose names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a very big fir tree.
Okay, we're going to come back to this. I just wanted to give you a little introduction of, that was Beatrix, that was the actress Beatrix, and you can see she worked primarily, did a lot of sketching and field studies out in the field, right? So you see the beautiful countryside that she's living in, right? You see all the animals that are in the countryside, and you can see she had a menagerie of animals in her house, outside of her house. She had a domesticated rabbit called Peter Rabbit. She had a Benjamin Bunny. And so I wanted to give you a sense of, and you have an introduction now of how she created what's called picture letters. That's how she developed her stories. So she has drawings, she has writings, drawings, and that's how she developed her stories. And they were stories really for, the entertainment of children, right? And you'll see that her governess suggested that she turn them into a book. So I just wanted to give you that sense because you sort of did a nice setting for like Beatrix Potter, right? Okay, let's go back to my. Okay, so Beatrix Potter, what was she? She was beloved illustrated magical storyteller. She was artistic visionary. She was a children's book author, illustrated author. She was a talented naturalist, but you may not know she was an amateur scientist in mycology, meaning fungus, geology, and archaeology. Hi.
What's mycology?
Fungus, study of fungi, fungus, okay. Lear tells us that the hand lens, the microscope, and the camera enhanced her innate artistic ability. I mentioned earlier that she was a farmer. She was actually a sheep farmer. She was a landowner. She was a conservationist working with the National Trust. At the end of her life, she donated all of her royalties to the National Trust. She was an entrepreneur and a businesswoman. I say that because she was a property owner. She was an entrepreneur, a businesswoman. She published herself. She had the savings to publish herself before a publisher ever published her, which I'll teach you. She was a traveler. She was traveled to the British Isles. She was London-born. She's London-born, but she traveled to the British Isles, the Lake District, Wales, and Scotland, among other places. What you see on the left here is her at age 9. I showed you this photograph earlier, right? Above is her sketch of the same year. That's a sketch of hers showing her lifelong love of nature. She did observational sketches constantly. You can see in the sketch, that's one page, you have leaves and you have caterpillars and you have insects and doggies for 1875. Childhood. I just wanted to briefly show you some photographs from her childhood. On the left is her father. He's a barrister, 1865, a year before Beatrix Potter was born. Beatrix Potter, Rupert was one of 7 children of a calico producer, Edmund Potter of Manchester, and the beautiful Jessie Crompton of Lancaster. Rupert was artistic and literary with a lifelong passion for photography. He went on to the University of London to study law and was called to the bar in 1857, after which he specialized in transfer of property and the establishment of trusts. In 1863, Rupert married Helen Leach. You can see her on the right there. Her name changed to Helen Potter after she married, right? She was the daughter of affluent cotton merchant John Leach at Staley Bridge and Jane Ashton of Hyde. It was a suitable match for both families, had North Country roots. This is going to be important later on. Shared backgrounds in Lancaster cotton and held Unitarian beliefs. So there's very little that's known about Helen Potter. The photograph you're seeing of her here is with Beatrice in 1874. She's 8 years old. Beatrice was very, very close to her father. She wrote to him while away on business, and she took after his artistic inclinations. The other 2 photographs on the right-hand side here are showing you 2 important individuals in Beatrix Potter's life. You have Norman Warren. He was of the publisher that ends up publishing Beatrix Potter's first book, The Tale of Beatrix Potter, Tale of Peter Rabbit rather. And he was her editor. And they fell in love, and he did several books with her. And in 1905, he proposed to her, and 1 month later, he died. So look to the right and you see Beatrice, and she's standing side by side with a Mr. Heelis, and she married him in 1913. So I wanted to show you, I found this little sketch, this darling sketch of two pigs, right? And they're looking out to the horizon, and it's done in sepia ink, and it's called Pigling Bland and Pigwig Look Down on the Valley. And it's illustration for page 69 of The Tale of Pigling Bland in sepia ink. The portrait of two pigs arm in arm in The Tale of Pigling Bland is not a portrait of me and Mr. Heelis. This is what Beatrix Potter writes. Potter insisted in a November 1930 letter to her friend, well, this was just before she got married. Okay, so what do you think? So anyway, I wanted to share that with you. You're seeing on the left here one of hundreds of paintings she did of mushrooms. This is a watercolor. This is not an oil painting. It's a fly agaric mushroom. It's a fungus painting. And as we'll soon find out, she was the main illustrator in a book about fungi. That's why I say mycology. Okay. In an illustrated world by Eleanor Taylor, I call it Beatrix Potter's magical world. She says, I've gathered great faith that the things we see and do as children can be called on and used in our adult-driven world. Beatrix Potter saw the world as accurately and as sharply as I believe children do, and her work spoke directly to children without condescension. During her visits to the Scottish countryside, Potter would take off on her beloved pony to explore the natural world. She would lie on the ground, feeling the cool moss beneath her. These moments stayed with her forever. She had an incredible memory for detail and a wondrous ability to draw on her past for inspiration. She could recall a scene of a pine root or fallen nest long after her eyesight had defeated her. Eleanor Taylor tells us this because she died, she had lost her eyesight and she had died of heart ailment. Okay, so. Beatrix Potter's artistic spell. This is Stephen Heller. You're seeing on the left here just a very, very small sampling of the books the little books, like the little books, right? Like this size. Okay, that Beatrix Potter created, all the myriads of characters that she created over the years. The Tale of Peter Rabbit, Tale of Benjamin Bunny, the Tale of Two Bad Mice, the Tale of Gloucester, one of my favorites, actually. Beatrix Potter had been the subject of numerous biographies and websites, a teleplay, and a recent biopic, but until now, she has not received enough praise as an artist whose drawings and watercolors set the standard for enchantment and sophistication in illustrated storybooks, to say nothing of her contributions to naturalistic art. Many of Potter's lovable creatures in her classic animal tales dare naturalistically drawn naturally from life. During her childhood, she devoted herself to continually sketching her menagerie of pets. Later, she made detailed drawings of flora and fauna from nature. Her creatures inhabited naturalistic rural and urban environments in which London-born Potter lived throughout her life and inspired her illustrations. Observation and imagination, Linda Lear. On the left here, you're seeing Dalgise. That photograph on the top was taken by her father, Rupert. On the bottom is her illustration of Dalgise, the same year. Over her long creative life, Beatrix Potter discovered and enjoyed many beautiful places, but only 2 ever qualified as a true home. As a young girl whose children was spent in an unloved birthplace in London, she gave her heart to Dalgise. It was a holiday house near Dunkeld in Perthshire in the Highlands of Scotland. For over 15 summers, the Scottish landscape provided a feast for her eye, nourishment for her imagination, and freedom for her spirit. Every location for a sense of place, every location she was with her family is in her books. She just recorded, observed, painted, sketched, and developed was the context for her stories, each of her stories. Observation and imagination, Linda Lear. It sometimes happens that the town child is more alive to the fresh beauty of the country than a child who is country born, Beatrice once observed. On the left here, you say her earliest sketchbook from Perthshire is full of drawings of leaves, flowers, insects, and animals. It says, Beatrix Potter's early naturalistic observational sketches of, you see on the left here, blusher mushrooms from 1893, and in Dunkeld, Perthshire, and a red squirrel in Keswick. A sense of place, the art and geography of Beatrix Potter. With her insatiable curiosity for the natural world and a keen eye for observation, beloved children's book illustrator and author Beatrix Potter drew her most significant inspiration from place. Whether it was country or town, landscape or interior, forest or garden, there is an inextricable link between Potter's artistic output and the environments that stimulated her work. While her birthplace of London would later become the center of her publishing successes, it was on family holidays that she thrived creatively in Scotland, in the Lake District, and in Wales. These reasons not only shaped her as a lifelong lover of nature, they also tied to milestones that made Potter the artist and storyteller we know today. We're going to focus now on the history of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter. But it was the tale of Peter Rabbit that launched Potter into fame, in which we know her today. Annie Moore, her former governor, suggested in 1900 that the imaginative picture letters that Potter had been sending to Moore's children for years would be well suited for children's books. Potter borrowed several of the original letters to recopy and found that Peter's story stood out the most. Potter felt certain that it would make a, quote, pretty book. After being turned down by many publishers, Potter printed a private edition for friends and family with her own funds. Before long, Frederick Warren and Company, remember we pointed out Norman Warren? Yes, that's the son of his, it was a family-run business of his dad. So before long, Frederick Warren and Company, one of the publishers who initially had turned down the little book, took a chance on the story. And with a year of its publication in 1902, more than 56,000 copies were in print. Why was it so successful? As Linda Lear, a Potter scholar, tells us, Beatrix Potter's genius lay in her ability to observe, to imagine, and ultimately to reveal in her art and in her stories the universal analogies between human and non-human nature. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop screen sharing and I'm going to run the tale of, it's very short, the tale of Peter Rabbit, right, as a video for you. And then we can also circulate this book.
The Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a very big fir tree. "Now, my dears," said old Mrs. Rabbit one morning, "you may go into the fields or down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put in a pie by Mrs. McGregor. Now run along and don't get into mischief. I am going out." Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the wood to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 round buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed under the gate. First he ate some lettuces and some French beans, and then he ate some radishes. And then, feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley. But round the end of a cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting out young cabbages, but he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out, "Stop, thief!" Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages, and the other shoe amongst the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on 4 legs and went faster, so that I think he might have got away altogether if he had not unfortunately run into a gooseberry net and got caught by the large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons, quite new. Peter gave himself up for lost and shed big tears, but his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows who flocked to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself. Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve which he intended to pop upon the top of Peter, but Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him, and rushed into the tool shed and jumped into a can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it had not had so much water in it. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath a flower pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking under each. Presently, Peter sneezed. Mr. McGregor was after him in no time and tried to put his foot upon Peter, who jumped out of a window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired of running after Peter. He went back to his work. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright, and he had not the least idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp with sitting in that can. After a time, he began to wander about, going lippity, lippity, not very fast, and looking all round. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked, and there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running in and out over the stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans to her family in the wood. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she had such a large bee in her mouth that she could not answer. She only shook her head at him. Peter began to cry. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Presently, he came to a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his water cans. A white cat was staring at some goldfish. She sat very, very still, but now and then the tip of her tail twitched as if it were alive. Peter thought it best to go away without speaking to her. He had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. He went back towards the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the noise of a hoe. Scritch, scratch, scratch, scritch. Peter scuttered underneath the bushes. But presently, as nothing happened, he came out and climbed upon a wheelbarrow and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned towards Peter, and beyond him was the gate. Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could go, along a straight walk behind some blackcurrant bushes. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him at the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the wood outside the garden. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes for a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds. Peter never stopped running or looked behind him till he got home to the big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped down on the nice soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fortnight. I am sorry to say that Peter was not very well during the evening. His mother put him to bed and made some chamomile tea, and she gave a dose of it to Peter. 1 tablespoonful to be taken at bedtime. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. The end.
Can't count this very well.
My poor cousins.
Look at me. Here I am. Right where I belong.
Sorry about that. I didn't quit out quite quick enough. Okay, let's go on. Okay, so what we're continuing with is I'm going to show you some of the sketches of the tale of Peter Rabbit. And on the top left, you can see that's a pencil. It's pencil and charcoal and ink sketch. Down below is one of the very first sketches that Beatrix Potter did when she was about to publish her book about the tale of Peter Rabbit, right? To the right, you can see how she sketches all the time. She sketches, and down below you see the mother rabbit with the 4 little bunnies, right? See how she does these sort of pencil and character sketches. She does an entire page of them, shows them from different vantage points, right? When she's developing her character. I wanted to show you this because in the actual, when the book was published for the tale of Peter Rabbit, you have Mrs. McGregor. This is on the left-hand side with little scribblings on the bottom. This is how Beatrix Potter actually envisioned Mrs. McGregor. But the publisher didn't like the character of Mrs. McGregor. So she was redrawn, and this is what was published on the right there. Can you see the difference? Right? You see in this illustration, you see Mrs. McGregor, and she presents the pie to Mr. McGregor, who you can see his knife and fork in his hand right there. And so you see below on, so the far right, where you see the actual image of Mrs. McGregor that was modified and printed, right? It says, in this version, a small, you can see behind her, a small blonde child with spoon in hand now also peeks over the more youthful Mrs. McGregor's elbow, joining the hungry little dog and Mr. McGregor's waiting hands resting on the table. Whether Norman still found the figures unsatisfactory, Norman Warren was, you know, her publisher and later on her fiance, right? He asked her to redraw Mrs. McGregor. Or perhaps it was the idea of Peter's father in the pie about to be eaten that seemed rather morbid. The scene was cut early on. Mr. McGregor's garden. I wanted to show you Peter when he first enters Mr. McGregor's garden, right? And you can see to the right there, you can see her sketches of Peter Rabbit and the other rabbits, right, in the shed, in the McGregor shed, right? These are also from 1902, right? On the far right, you can see she did page after page after page of sketches of rabbits, rabbits' heads, rabbits' expressions. This is on the right is of sepia, wash, and pen and ink, right? It says below this illustration, which is grisaille, which is in the middle here, it says potting shed, Bedwell Lodge, Hertfordshire, 1891. This is done far, far in advance of her actually developing the illustration for the Tale of Peter Rabbit. So it says Potter made a striking series of grisaille. This is called grisaille, this sketch, this illustration. It's based on the house and outbuildings of Bedwell Lodge in Hertfordshire, and the potting shed was revived in Mr. McGregor's in the Tale of Peter Rabbit. The watering can where Peter hides is just visible in the foreground. Can you see in the foreground there? And it's in front of like potted geraniums, right? Mr. McGregor's garden. I wanted to show you on the far left here. These are one of her picture letters. The picture letters are the illustrations, and they're accompanied by little writings by Beatrix Potter when she's developing the story. So the top one, you can see Mr. McGregor, who is planting out young cabbages, but he jumped up and ran after Peter, running with a rake and calling him, "Stop, thief." Then you have below, you have Peter was most dreadfully frightened, and I can't, something all over the garden, for he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages. Okay, in the middle, you're seeing a very, very preliminary sketch, a rough sketch of Mr. McGregor. He's in the shed looking for Peter, right? He's bent over, he's starting to turn over the pots, right? The far right, that is Beatrix Potter's inspiration for Mr. McGregor. We found out that his name is Charles McIntosh, and he was a Perthshire naturalist in mycology. He was Beatrix Potter's inspiration for falling in love with mycology, which is fungi or fungus, and it started her off in a whole new direction as a naturalist. You can see below, that's one of her very, very detailed sketches, watercolors. It resulted in this book, Wayside and Woodland Fungi by W.P.K. Finlay. all of the illustrations are in color by Beatrix Potter. There are hundreds of illustrations in this book of fungi, but I wanted to show you some examples of how much she was in love with the study of mycology. I don't know. I wanted to show you this because on the left, you see the study of you can see the study of the Garden Gate. These are all done in Keswick. These are the very, very elaborate sketches that Beatrix Potter did in preparation for the tale of Peter Rabbit, right? Below you have the garden at Tembe with the cat, and the pool is, you can see above there, the white cat looks into the fish pond. Remember Peter Rabbit at the very end, he's trying to get out of the garden and he sees a cat, and the cat is looking over into a fish pool, right? And so just such lovely illustrations, right? Now, I want to introduce you to a book you may not know. It's called Yours Affectionately, Peter Rabbit, and they're miniature letters by Beatrix Potter. And so I pulled out this because I wanted to show you that Beatrix Potter she had a lot of correspondence with children, and she created a little bag, you see there, GPO, and she embroidered it, and she collected what were the imagined letters of her characters. And in this case, Peter Rabbit's correspondence was with Mr. and Mrs. McGregor. Here's one of the letters. So it says, Mr. McGregor, Gardener's Cottage. Dear sir, I write to ask whether your spring cabbages are ready. Kindly reply or return and oblige. Yours truly, Peter Rabbit. Master P. Rabbit, under fir tree. Sir, I write by desire of my husband, Mr. McGregor, who is in bed with a cold, to say, if you comes here again, we will inform the police. P.S. I have bought a new pie dish. It is very large. Master Benjamin Bunny, the Warren, dear cousin Benjamin, I have had a very ill-written letter from Mrs. McGregor. She says Mr. M is in bed with a cold. Will you meet me at the corner of the wood near this garden at 6 this evening? In haste. Your must be affectionate cousin, Peter Rabbit. Now, why would I show you this letter? And why, when I read this letter from of Jane McGregor, what you'll notice on the left here is one page from a journal that Beatrix Potter kept of North Country terms. She wanted to record the dialogue in an actual way, right? So this is called the Glossary of North Country Terms. It was used, this is from the Fairy Caravan, and it's handwritten draft by Potter in pen and ink. She wanted her dialogue to be authentic. And so she kept this journal of, remember I was saying that her family harkens from North Country, right? She wanted to make sure that her dialogue was authentic. And so she kept this journal of terms and phrases, and she used it in her writing. And also, as you can see in this correspondence. So today we discovered Beatrix Potter's world, and London-born Beatrix Potter was a beloved illustrator and magical storyteller. And Emily Zach's The Art of Beatrix Potter is the first book to comprehensively examine her visual world, her prolific and international career. As Eleanor Taylor points out, Beatrix Potter's watercolors are a marvel. exquisitely, lovingly painted works of art. Her attention to detail, memory, and passion was evident in every brushstroke. Her timeless work still speaking to every one of us, young and old. Beatrix Potter's delightful, naturalistic illustrations and magical storytelling stand out even 100 years later. Her career began with the iconic The Tale of Peter Rabbit, and she is one of the most successful and beloved illustrators and children's authors of the 20th century. So I'm going to end with something that I discovered last night. So in December of 2017, asteroid 13975 is named Beatrix Potter. Eric Elst discovered the asteroid in 1992. So that's a recent piece of trivia about Beatrix Potter. Thank you very much. So I will do you have any questions? I don't know if to.
The woman who wrote the biography, Taylor, is that recent or was that around the time that she died?
I thought it was written a couple of years ago. Okay, I'm going to circulate these two books.
This is the original and authorizing. You have this. My kids. You have this at home? Yeah. Thank you. Original and authorizing.
I find it interesting, I don't know why.
Where did you get this? Oh, I bought this a long time ago. That I bought recently. I used to get. Yeah, I bought it for my bookstore. Yeah, they ordered it. So, do you want to see this? Yes, it is. It's correspondence. See, it's they're letters. They're I think it's so funny, right? I think she had, did she have something like 27 of those little books? She had 27 of those little books that so she developed all of those wonderful characters, right? When she was so talented, I mean, Chow was an illustrator, she was also an author. Yeah, and a naturalist. And look at that, and I said mycology, geology, she was so detail-minded. She was so detail-minded. Mycology, geology, archaeology. That's not around today. The set of words I'm getting.
I was gonna say, I find it interesting that there's this movement of children's books. Because I'm thinking Alice in Wonderland, and she's in Peter Rabbit.
Was I supposed to press it? I didn't do that. I see the person. Oh, this was great. Was this your idea? Yeah. Oh, I'm just used to it.